started so we have enough time to complete the training and have questions, times for questions at the end. Again, welcome. I'm Sue Albel, and I'm with the Department of Children and Families, and I'm from the Central Region. I'm the Missing Child and Human Trafficking Specialist. And with us...
Hi, I'm Sarah Cummings. Oh, can you hear me? I'm Sarah Cummings from Broward Sheriff's Office, Juvenile Assessment Center, and I'm the treatment manager of the Juvenile Assessment Team, who does mental health, substance abuse assessments, and psychosocial evaluations with kids who flag for indicators when they come to the Juvenile Assessment Center. I just want to talk to you about the objectives. The objectives today is to learn the indicators of labor trafficking, which Sue will start the presentation regarding that, then describe indicators of commercialized sex trafficking, and then also discuss indicators for victims of domestic minor sex trafficking. So those are the objectives today, and hopefully by the time that you finish hearing both of us speak, you'll be able to go home with some identifiers and being able to report more victims to the hotline. There we go.
Okay. Oh, good. Now it's working. Everyone can hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to use the clicker or should I? Okay. Well, we can't start off without giving a definition of what human trafficking is. So the federal definition of human trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a child for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. However, under federal law for sex trafficking, you do not need the force, fraud, or coercion if you're under 18 because the child is not at the age of consent. And with trafficking victims, they can be smuggled into the United States, or they can arrive with a legitimate visa or work visa or be a U.S. citizen. A lot of people think with trafficking there has to be movement. There does not have to be movement at all. There can be, but there doesn't have to be. And trafficking can occur in many different situations, including domestic servitude in the hospitality industry, the factories, sweatshops, migrant farm works, nursing homes, cleaning, and all occupations. And really how it works is that they're usually subcontracted agencies. So like the Hilton doesn't traffic their workers, but they might contract with an agency that does. And the next slide, I believe, is an example of something that happened in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm not an expert on labor trafficking. I deal more with children and sex trafficking, but I am aware of this case, and I actually heard one of the victims speak one time. But in Boca Raton, it was Manuel and Maldonado, a labor trafficking case. In November 2007, over 50 workers from the Philippines were brought to Boca to work by two leasing agencies, and they were promised free housing, full-time jobs, and food service at a country club, and each had to pay. They had to pay the person who recruited them $3,000 to $8,000 while they were in the Philippines to be able to get to the United States to get what they thought was a better life. 30 people were forced to live in a 3-bedroom house. The passports and the return airline tickets, everything was confiscated. They were threatened, and they were not allowed to leave their residence without permission, and money was routinely deducted from their earnings. So in April 2010, a federal grand jury in West Palm Beach indicted the Manuel and Maldonado on human trafficking offenses, also charging Manuel with visa fraud, falsifying information to obtain foreign labor certifications. So these people were brought here for a better life. They ended up being kind of forced and held in a house, and were told they couldn't leave, and they were also threatened if they said anything to anybody that they would be deported because they had paid all that money and they couldn't go back. So it was a big case that actually went to trial. Statistics on human trafficking: 20.9 million worldwide, 2.5 million in the United States, 18,500 to 20,000 new victims are brought to the United States, 600,000 to 800,000 victims are trafficked annually worldwide, 56% of victims are women and children, 83% are used in the sex industry, and 16% are used in the sex industry internationally. So 83 in the United States, 16% internationally. This next slide is actually, anybody ever see the human trafficking miniseries on Lifetime a few years back? This is actually the closing argument of the state attorney, and she states some very good information, some facts, and that's why I'm playing it here. Of course, the movie was made for TV, so it's not really as realistic as what we see every day. Not that it doesn't happen, It's a situation where somebody from Eastern Europe brought in girls to the United States and trafficked them and recruited some girls while they were here as well. But they were all young girls. But listen to the state attorney's argument because it's very informational.
In 1865, President Abraham Lincoln and the U.S. Congress ratified the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States." No sensible person believes that slavery could happen in the 21st century, far less on our shores. We couldn't be more wrong. Slave traffickers around the world have rediscovered how profitable it is to buy and sell people. Each one of these girls could be your sister, or your best friend, or, as Annie Gray showed us, your daughter. None of these 57 girls would have lasted more than 4 years in our country. Each one of them would have been worked to death as a sex slave in a brothel, murdered for an infraction of her master's rules, or contracting hepatitis or AIDS. Human trafficking has emerged as a tragic whiplash of the economic transition that has occurred over the past several years in Eastern Europe. Men like Sergei Karpovich know how to take advantage of this. Now, we stopped him, but there are many more waiting to take his place. But no matter how difficult our battle is, it is vitally important that law enforcement, the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, that we all keep working together as a team to battle these ruthless criminals. At the same time, we need to create a climate of hope for their victims. We need to give these young women the idea that their lives are still worth living without shame after all the desperation and hardship that they've endured. And perhaps most importantly, we must face the fact that none of this horror would be possible if our culture didn't create a demand for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States is one of the largest markets for sex slavery in the entire world. We need to realize that modern-day slavery is only occurring because we choose to ignore it.
Anyone see that movie? It was a miniseries. It was really pretty good, actually. So why is it such a lucrative industry? Why does it make so much money? It's all about greed. It's all about money, trafficking is. It yields an estimated $32 to $34 billion in profits each year. And after drug trafficking, it's tied with arms trafficking. And what's the difference between human trafficking and drug trafficking and arms trafficking? You're going to be able to sell the same person over and over and over without reinvesting. And usually, initially, there's not an investment to begin with. But with cocaine, if you go buy a kilo of cocaine, you're going to have to reinvest once you sell that kilo. And you have to keep reinvesting. So human trafficking is very profitable. Social service and juvenile justice providers play important roles in identifying these victims. And even though we think it's a hidden problem, once you know what the identifiers are, you're going to see it everywhere. It is everywhere. This is actually a sheet that's taken out of the DCF Human Trafficking Indicator tool, and it's for all forms of trafficking. And it says that the victim will show evidence of physical, mental, or sexual abuse, cannot or will not speak on their own behalf, or is not English speaking, is not allowed to speak to you alone or is being controlled, does not have access to identity or travel documents, works unusually long hours and is unpaid or paid very little, will not cooperate, gives you wrong information about identity and living situation, is not in school or has significant gaps in schooling, lives at his or her workplace or with an employer who lives with many people in a small area. And going back to that Boca Raton case, we said 30 people in one house. My understanding was there were 2 sets of bunk beds in each bedroom, and they had 3 shifts. So a total of 12 people were sleeping in one bedroom at shifts. running shifts. Has heightened sense of fear and distrust of authority, and has engaged in prostitution or commercial sex acts. All these are a combination. So the DCF, and the Department of Children and Families, added the maltreatment of human trafficking in May 2009. Before that, we didn't receive reports for human trafficking. That very first year, it was added in the middle of the year. The statewide, we received 43 reports. The second year, 202 reports, which would be double if you think of 6 months. And in 2011, it even doubled more than that again, 427. In 2012, last year, 637 reports. This year, we're thought to receive between 800 and 1,000 reports. I think we're already over 600 as of October 1st. And that's because of awareness of situations like this, where everyone's becoming more aware and they know what to call in. And I think Sarah is going to talk a little bit more about how to make calls later as well. And for those who are interested, because everyone always asks you, how many reports have you received? I broke it down by county. Not every county of Florida is up here, but every county that last year received at least 2 reports. And then I put next to it the first 6 months of this year, how many reports were received. Obviously, you can see that Miami-Dade is number 1. Last year, they received 99 reports. In the first 6 months of this year, they received 72 reports. And remind you, these are reports, not necessarily verified cases. These are reports called into the hotline. These are not the findings. But still, it shows you the awareness that's going around and how it's increasing. Broward County is number 2. 87 reports were called in. Last year, 62 the first 6 months of this year. Hillsborough and Orange County are kind of neck to neck. In fact, the first 6 months of this year, Orange County has outnumbered Hillsborough. But those are the highest counties in the state for receiving reports through DCF hotline.
And I just wanted to mention, because I am from Broward, that at least half those calls made from Broward last year and this year actually came through the Juvenile Assessment Center, because we are identifying youth victims and reporting them into the hotline. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we're identifying them later in the discussion.
Okay, so what kind of reports did we receive through the hotlines? The top one we received, obviously, is sex trafficking. We received reports coded for human trafficking as baby selling, but remember, if it's not sex trafficking, there has to be forced fraud or coercion. So when you have a pregnant mom-to-be who wants to sell her baby when it's born for the highest bidder, that's not really trafficking, because there's no forced fraud or coercion. It's an illegal situation. It's not good, but it's not really human trafficking. Traveling sales crews is a big thing we're seeing a lot of. We definitely see a lot of them in the central region. I don't know about the other regions. And mostly they're groups that initiate from Orange County and they travel to surrounding counties and sell items. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more next screen. And labor, we don't really get any direct labor cases, except similar to the traveling sales crew is a labor type of trafficking. So, do you know the labor laws I put up here? So under 14, you cannot work at all, period. 14 and 15 may work up to 15 hours per week, but they have to be supervised by eye contact. So door-to-door sales is a hazardous occupation, and 14, 15-year-olds have to be supervised at all times. So when you have these guys who say they have, like, for example, I know in Orange County we have like 4 groups. One is called TADA, Teens Against Drugs and Alcohol. One is called TAD, Teen Against Drugs. One is called Tenacious Teens, and the other one is called Tenacious Youth. All 4 of these groups have a common denominator, the same person. They all broke off from the same guy, and he has trained them all how to do things. They actually go online, they register a a corporation, nonprofit corporation, and they print out the articles of corporation in good standing. Anybody in this room can go online right now and fill out a form, pay $75 and print out a nonprofit corporation. Doesn't really mean anything. Doesn't mean you're legit, doesn't mean you're running your business legit, and there's really a big loophole because there's no monitoring of these type of nonprofits. These guys actually go around to poor areas, poor neighborhoods where kids really, really want to work. They don't force them to work, they willingly go with them, but there's fraud because they tell them that they're running a nonprofit, they tell them they're going to get different things. Sometimes it's scholarships, sometimes it's they get to go to Universal, whatever it may be, once they earn so many points. But once they earn so many points, he will drive them to Universal, but they buy their own ticket. I mean, there's really no nonprofit, there's really no education against drugs. It's really a huge scam. And it's really, really sad because a lot of kids are being taken advantage of. The kids that we're coming across are between age 8 to 13, We've had an 8-year-old child faint in a strange neighborhood. Who knows if she's going to be knocking on the predator's door? They're told that they need to use the bathroom, ask the people they knock on their doors. If they want water, to ask for water. Now they're getting smart because we have complained that they don't have communication, so he makes them rent phones from them for $2. He'll rent them a phone for the day. So it's a big scam. I think on the next screen we actually have a news clip to explain it a little closer.
Tonight, a door-to-door scheme involving young kids is busted right here in the Bay Area. Deputies say the kids spent more than 5 hours out in the heat without any food, water, or way to get in touch with the two men who put them up to it. Our Jacqueline Iglesias is following this story for us and joins us now. Jacqueline, how did deputies get involved in this?
Well, Jameson, one of those kids became so thirsty while walking around Spring Hill that they rang a doorbell and asked a resident to please give them water. And that concerned resident called police.
Yeah, they were tired, they were sweaty, they were young.
The boy who came to Gregory Lezick's Spring Hill door Wednesday was one of 9 Orlando kids authorities say were exploited in a door-to-door scam.
He had a little basket with him, like a Rubbermaid thing, and he had his papers on top.
Inside that basket,
they went to the dollar store and bought various items: dog biscuits, candy, cookies, fiddle faddle, peanut brittle.
residents say the boys claimed to be collecting donations for a nonprofit youth group. And those papers Lezick saw in the boys' basket, police told us those were cue cards written out for the kids with specific instructions by these men, Kendi Sennett and Terrence Holliday.
They were just left out to wander. They didn't know anything.
Walking in the 90-degree heat for 5 hours, the kids, who range in age from 12 to 15, began asking people for water. Concerned there was no adult with the kids, one resident called police.
I think it's terrible when they exploiting children like that.
Police say the kids were selling those dollar store goodies for $8 a piece. The bulk of the money went to these two men, and the kids got to keep $2. The kids reportedly said they made about $50 a week. On Wednesday alone, the group duped residents here into giving them $500. Only they didn't get money out of this man.
Well, I'm glad I didn't do anything except let him use my phone.
Bob Hahn says 3 boys used his phone to call their boss for a ride home. Now, the parents of these kids told deputies that they thought their children were right here in Tampa attending an anti-drug rally. Now, Sennett and Holliday are now facing fraud and child neglect charges. In the newsroom, Jacqueline Iglesias, ABC Action News.
Jacqueline, thank you.
Okay, yeah, it really is exploitation of the children. It is really labor trafficking because it's so new. I do think that the U.S. Attorney is trying to do a case on this, but we have many reports. It all rings around the same group, but they actually are all in different counties. These same kids are taken to Broward, to Brevard, to Volusia, up to Jacksonville. Some of them have gone up to Georgia. They get a percentage of what they sell. They're encouraged to sell more because it's a point system if they want to get anywhere. But we've had kids, like I said, we've had actually a child die, but it was an epilepsy seizure, and it was ruled that way, but yet, there was no supervision or epileptic medicine for that child. He was 13, honor student. It's really sad what's going on, and they actually target the lower families. So these kids, actually, the parents encourage them to go out and make money. They don't understand that they're breaking the labor laws as well. So what is DMST or CSEC? Domestic minor sex trafficking, and CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children. These are acronyms you hear a lot in the human trafficking world. Domestic minor sex trafficking occurs when a U.S. citizen who has not attained 18 years of age is engaged in a commercial sex act. And that term came up about 6 years ago because everybody was thinking these are children brought from different countries. It's not happening in our own schools and with our own kids, our own neighborhoods, but it is. And commercial sex act means any act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. So what are examples of CSEC, or commercial sex exploitation of children? Is prostitution, exotic dancing, pornography, and there's many more examples. I think the next page. Yes, I do have some here. These are actual examples taken from reports we've received through the hotline, and we have verified them for human trafficking. So a minor creating a sex act with an adult in exchange for a place to sleep. Again, you're changing something of value for sex. A pimp prostituting out an adolescent. A father trading his underage daughter for crack. A mother allowing her landlord to have sex with her child as rent payment. A 50-year-old trading a sex act with an adult for money. a nightclub owner providing shelter and food for minors in exchange for exotic dancing. All of those are different forms of sex trafficking. And we always forget about the boys. Boys are also victims. We kind of think pimps are men and victims are females. That's not always true. There are pimps that are females and there are victims that are boys as well. And boys are referred to as rent boys, house boys, or chickens. And it's a little bit different dynamics. The ages 11 to 14 are considered commercially exploited usually, but over 14, usually they're independent, doing it on their own will. And they're known as renegades. And I threw up this website just to show you how real it is, houseboys.usa, I think it is. I didn't go into it, it's very pornographic, but you can order up a boy online, just like you can order up females online as well. So what are the national statistics? 1.5 to 2 million kids will go missing this year. 5,000 of those kids will die while missing. 70% are victims of crime or will commit a crime while missing, which DJJ knows so well. 2/3 of all runaways are approached for recruitment into the sex industry after being on the streets for 48 hours. And that's because of street survival. You can run away, but you can survive how long without, roof over your head or food, and you start doing things that you need to do to get what you need. And they think they're completely okay with that. In 2012, a total of 2,143 DCF children generated 8,237 missing child episodes. So we had some habitual runners, and that's another indicator of also getting involved in sex trafficking is the habitual runner, because then they have to survive. This is a child that went missing while in foster care. She had gone missing 3 times before this episode. The first time was in June. The first time in June, she had been gone for, I think, a total of 2 days. When she came back, she had said she had been gang raped. And then she recanted, which is usual. They usually do. And nothing much really happened with that criminally because she recanted. Then she went missing twice before January, but just for less than 24 hours. She'd go missing, not come home from school. They wouldn't know where she was. And then she came back. In January, she goes missing. And in her foster home, she had a foster brother who was a little bit paid attention to what was going on with her and had told her caseworker, said, I have concerns for this child. She was hanging out in a certain area known for prostitution. She's hanging out with this older man, and this is the same older man that came and picked her up from the house when she ran away. And they also, she had called back to her foster brother and said, hey, I'm on my way to Jacksonville. I think this was a Brevard County case. I'm on my way to Jacksonville to do some business. And he asked what kind of business, and she wouldn't say. So there was high suspicion that she had gotten involved in some form of sex trafficking. So on the next slide, they call me. I do some searches. I don't know if you're familiar with Backpage, but Backpage advertises escort services. And we all know what escort services are. And you can search for an area. So I immediately go and look for the Brevard County area. I choose on escorts. Want to go to the next page? And all the ads come up. That's what it looks like. And then next page for me. And this is her. She's on Backpage. It says she's 28. We know she's not. It says new in town. Well, we know she's new. It's the first time she's been posted. It's actually the first time she's been out there, so to speak, in the live. I don't have my glasses on to read it for you, but I think it says something like Tina here, fetish friendly, in calls, out calls available. I know we haven't talked about in calls and out calls, but in calls is when the John will come to you. Out calls when the victim or the child will go out to the John. And it has a phone number there, who to call. You want to go to the next page? Oops, I don't have the next one in there. I must have taken it out. Okay, I have a picture where I blow up one of her slides, and you can see that she's not very happy. She's not. Some of these kids who've been doing it for a long time, they're really excited about it, and you can see it, in their faces. This girl, she has fear in her face when you blow up her picture. So I Googled the number, and of course, 4 other ads come up, but 4 different girls, same phone number. So then I take that phone number and run it into a program I have called LexisNexis, and it comes up registered to JL Escort Services. So the pimp wasn't hiding anything, really. It's all a registered company. There's actually a website. A lot of girls posted on his website, not this particular girl. She's a minor. She wasn't on his website, and she was new into the whole thing. Of course, it was referred to the FBI. This child is actually doing well. She never went back because she was actually caught pretty quickly and the first time out. So the sooner you can get them back the more success rate you have with them surviving. Because usually it's really hard once they start staying in it longer.
And that's one of the reasons that we're stressing the indicators, because if we as a population can start identifying these kids early on, then it's easier to disengage them from the life. If they're really entrenched in the life, then it's much more difficult, and then you have that situation where the kid is habitually running away, and they're more entrenched in the life than they are in their current home situation, whether it be foster care or whether it be with their family.
Okay, next one. Now this child came into foster care. She was already entrenched in the life. She came in basically because of that. I think her mother was a drug user, and she had been exposed to some things to get drugs for her mom. So this is how she looks when she first comes into care. She's at 14. I want to go to the next one. Yeah. And this is how she looks when she runs away within weeks. This is her postings on her MySpace page. This is an older case. This is when MySpace was more popular than Facebook. And you can see the tattoos. And that's one thing I think we'll talk about that, about branding and tattoos, how they use tattoos to brand their product, their girls, basically. Here she is 14. She doesn't look like the same girl, but it is. You want to go on. And they also have street names. They often, you'll find out that they have street names. And this child had several street names. At one time it was Star, then it was Snow Bunny, and it changed depending on her pimp. But this is when she's 16. She had run away many times. I will tell you, I featured this child because I personally was involved with her many times. She actually has been involved in 3 different federal prosecutions against a total of 12 different pimps. Each case had 3 or 4 pimps in it. And they got prosecuted and sentenced. She's typical. She's very cooperative when you first rescue her for 24 hours, and then she wants to revert back. She has Stockholm Syndrome and she wants to get back. She's their highest producer. She's the star, and she needs to get back to work. But one time when she ran away many times, but one time that she ran away was significant because they were getting ready to pick her up to be a witness in Broward County, actually. And she was placed up in Fort Walton area. So the FBI agent and her case manager had made arrangements to go pick her up. Well, she did not want to testify. So she took off. And she said that they would kill her. They'd kill everybody in that home if she testified. So she takes off, and she goes up to Louisiana, I think it was, is where she was located. Before she took off, she did not have that tattoo successful across her chest. But I will tell you, in her prior recovery, when we recovered her and she always writes great 4-page testimonies for you. She named every pimp she'd come across. She named their real name and their street name. And Successful, I will tell you, his street name is Aaron Gordy. His real name is Aaron Gordy. His street name is Successful, sorry. And she had talked about him in one of her prior episodes and said that she didn't like him. She didn't stay with him. But she runs away to Louisiana, and finally we make contact with her. She would pick up her phone, actually. She would call, she would contact her Facebook. And she agreed for the FBI agent to come back. So the FBI agent up in Louisiana meets her at one of the casinos someplace and escorts her to the airport, puts her on a plane to come back to Broward County, where the FBI agent she knew and her caseworker were waiting for her. And of course, the FBI agent takes her and puts her on the plane. Nothing against FBI agents. Any in the room? But they don't escort her. They put her on the plane. And of course the plane stops in Atlanta, and guess what? The FBI agent that was in Atlanta that was supposed to meet her, to babysit her, so to speak, forgot his ID. So he didn't get in through security. So she gets off the plane and she's gone again. Anyhow, we eventually found her, and she ended up coming back to Broward County, but they did a plea bargain and she didn't have to testify. Usually they do plea bargains. I don't think very few have actually had to testify, but if you can't tell them, they don't have to. But anyhow, when she came back, she had Successful, so we knew which pimp she was working with for the 2 weeks she was gone. This is her again when she aged out, just to show you more tattoos. She has some kind of bill sign on her hip. And by the way, on each shoulder she has one Steve and one Pierre. Both are in prison. Successful has never been arrested as far as I know. Not in her cases anyhow, but she has several tattoos. If you go to the next page, that's her escort ad. On her Facebook, you can see now, she posts on her Facebook page, she goes, my wifey, and we'll talk about wifey, I think we talk about language later, don't we? My wifey, she names the girls, new tattoo, and if you notice, Lucky, $ baby. Dollar signs are important, because that means they're money producing. Those are key indicators on your tattoos on your kids. And on the top of her foot, she has Lucky Skills. If you go to the next page, This is also, she posts another wifey's tattoo, and it says Lucky $Skills Inc. So I guess she's sophisticated and put ink on their symbol. But that's the same tattoo you'll see on all the girls, which are known as wifeys. So you have the main girl, and then you have all the other ones, which are known as wifeys or wife-in-laws. Want to go on? This is her. And you can just see all her tattoos, and I'm just putting this picture here to show you how they mark them up. And then I keep track of her. She's over 18. She's not in care, but she posted in Orlando, I think it's January this past year. That's her still out there working. We tried so much with her to bring her in. She did not want to leave the life. So, common characteristics of dependent children, delinquent children, and CSEC victim. I don't know if that delinquent is spelled right. I probably misspelled that. It looks funny. Okay. It's right? Okay. Well, the kids all have low self-esteem, history of physical abuse or history of sexual abuse, runaway episodes, drug abuse, troubled or dysfunctional families. And I think in the DCF and the DJJ system, we deal with these all these kids have the same characteristics. If not all of them, 2 or 3 of them for sure.
Right, and this is definitely kids in that are dependent and delinquent or delinquent, because these are common characteristics, and these kids are definitely at greater risk for being recruited, but they're also any kid that has access to a computer, that walks home from the bus stop, that goes to a mall, that hangs out at the swap shop. Any of those kids can be victimized. These are just kids that are at greater risk of being victimized. Yeah, I think I just do it from there. Okay. All right, so we told you we'd give you some common characteristics to look for. These are just questions that we have a pilot project that's going on in Broward with the Department of Juvenile Justice. In Broward County, during 2010, through our Juvenile Assessment Center, we were members of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition. And Adrienne Reese from the BHTC, she said, "Hey Sarah, don't you ask the kids questions when they come to the JAC?" And I said, "Yes, we do a mental health assessment and a substance abuse assessment. We do a psychosocial evaluation." She said, "Can you add some questions in your psychosocial evaluation to help identify kids that may be victims of trafficking?" And I said, "Sure, but what questions am I going to ask?" So we did our homework. I spoke with FBI, probably the same agent that was working with the young lady that Sue spoke of, and I looked at a Portland project that was done in Portland, Oregon, toward identifying victims that was facilitated through Shared Hope International. So I took some of those questions and some of the information the FBI agent had given me and added those questions into the psychosocial evaluation. This is just a sampling of some of the questions that we asked, just to give us an indication and possibly that the kid may be a victim of trafficking. Now, these in isolation don't mean anything. It's creating a picture together by asking all these questions and also looking at tattoos and speaking to the guardian that really gives us enough information to be able to call the hotline and make sure that the call gets accepted. So the first question is about runaway, and you heard Sue talk about how that young lady kept running away. And because kids are out on the street, they have to survive. They have to eat, they have to drink, they need clothes, they need shelter. So because they're at such great risk when they're runaway for being recruited, that's our trigger. So if the kid has a history of runaway, they let us know that they either voluntarily left the house, maybe their parent kicked them out. We also ask them if they can come and go as they please. Because if they can come and go as they please in the home, even if they're living at home with their parents, that's a key indicator to us that possibly that kid could be recruited or be at risk for being recruited. So if the kid answers, "Yes, I've run away from my house even once," then we do a full assessment and ask a smattering of questions to see if that child might be either at significant risk for future victimization or at current risk right now being victimized for domestic minor sex trafficking or sexual exploitation. So the first question is asking them about if they run away and what their history of runaway, where do they run to, what do they do when they run away, who do they hang out with. We ask some follow-up questions about runaway. And we ask them if they ever had involvement with Department of Children and Families, whether that be if they've ever been in foster care or have they had in-home investigations. Has an abuse call been called on a family? We want to know because at least from Broward data, 94% of the kids that have been identified as victims have had prior in-home investigations. So they've definitely been victims of abuse and brought up in chaotic situations. We asked them flat out if they've ever experienced physical abuse, sexual abuse. We asked them this one by one because I don't want to just read the question, hey, have you ever been a victim of sexual abuse? Have you ever been a victim of witnessed domestic violence? We try to take our time and ask those questions very slowly and methodically because we know that, again, kids that are victims of abuse are at greater risk of being exploited. We ask them also if they have any gang membership or if they're friends with gangs, because there are certain gangs in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm sure in other areas too, or I should say Broward County, that are known to exploit kids. And sometimes gangs, there are certain gangs that are known for sex trafficking. So certain kids will let us know that, yes, I'm a member of, we had a young lady with an MOB tattoo. And she identified herself as a member of Bloods, and she very blatantly let us know that she was being trafficked out of Hialeah through the Bloods. So sometimes we do ask for a gang membership or at least gang affiliation. We ask the kids about who they're closest to in their family. Of course, this is for kids that are in the community, not dependent kids, because we want to know, do they have a solid relationship with their parents, or is that a conflictual relationship? Because that can be a key into the fact that the kid could be at risk. We flat out ask, not if they have ever exchanged sex for food, money, shelter, or drugs, or any other material items, but we ask if they've ever been approached, because that's a little bit more palatable to the kids. And it gives them a way out, but it also gives us an indication, have they been exposed in the past to possibly being exploited? And believe it or not, there are kids that answer yes to that. And then they let us know that they have actually exchanged sex or sexual favors. Now, not every kid that has been exploited will answer yes to that, but there are some kids that flat out, just upon being asked kind of a blatant question, will give a good answer, will give a positive answer. So, of course, if they say that, then we know right away we're going to call it into the hotline. We ask the kid, like Sue talked about, we ask the kids about their tattoos. We ask, where'd they get the tattoo, who was with them when they got it, what does it mean to them. We ask about tattoos that we can see and tattoos we cannot see, because a lot of these kids, it may not be visible to us, their tattoos, and we're going to show some slides later on, so I'll give a little bit more in depth about tattoos we may be looking for. We ask them also about cell phones. We ask, do you have a cell phone? Do you have more than one cell phone? Who pays for your cell phone? We ask for the cell phone number, because that can give us an indication, because often the kids will, if an adult male or adult female is paying for their phone other than their family member, that's going to put a red flag for us, up for us. If they come in their property and they have more than one cell phone, that's going to put another red flag up for us, because maybe one's their own phone and one is their trafficker's phone that they need to pick up, and they need to be where the trafficker tells them to go. We do find that if we ask some of these questions intermittently, or we ask them a little bit more casually or informally, then the kids are more forthcoming. When we ask the questions all together, like I wouldn't say to you, go out and add these questions and put them all together in any evaluation you're asking, the kids sometimes get keyed on to what we're looking for. And we're really trying to kind of smooth into the conversation with the kids so that we can really help identify them. On the next slide, it talks about how important it is to speak to the guardian or the caretaker. Because there are kids that have come through and they answer no, 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 no throughout our evaluation. But then when we speak to the guardian, to finish the assessments, we speak to the guardian. A guardian will tell us, no, she comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I say to the guardian, well, when she comes back, does she have any material items that you didn't buy for her? Yes, she comes back with her nails and her hair done. So that's showing me that she's exchanging, right? That someone's paying for her hair and her nails. Well, what's she giving back to that person to pay for her hair and her nails? Or she comes back with new clothes or even older clothes, but the mom or dad didn't buy them for her, so where's she getting them? Sometimes even handbags or other items, and sometimes even wads of money. So of course it's going to put a red flag. And it's amazing to me sometimes, because even parents sometimes don't know what's going on. Like the kids will come, the young lady or the I'm going to say young lady only because the majority are young ladies, but the young lady will come back with like $200 from one Ray episode, and the parent hadn't thought that maybe she was being trafficked. And the next ad, Sue also talked about back pages, and this is the young lady, and she swore up and down in the psychosocial evaluation, again, that she was not trafficking, she'd never been approached, she doesn't have an adult boyfriend or any other adult relationships, but this is her. She was 15 years old at the time, and speaking to the mom let us know, when we started asking the mom, does she run away? Where does she go when she runs away? The mom then let us know that she had actually been advertising on back pages, and mom knew that it was her because she had a link on her Facebook to this ad. And what's interesting, and what's a little bit different from the pictures that Sue showed, is that the traffickers are getting smarter, because the traffickers the kids used to show their faces, right? You saw the blacked out faces that Sue had showed, but they're getting smarter now where they're taking side angles or back angles so you can't see this kid's face. So if she's missing, and children's trying to find her, they're not going to be able to identify her off that picture. She's got a wig on here. And I couldn't tell I wouldn't know it was her until her mom told us it was her, and it was linked to her, that this is her. And she was only 15 at the time, and of course it says she's 21. Well, she's not 21. And then you can see that she would travel anywhere between Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, and Miami. So she was working 2 different counties. And it was she and some friends that were all being trafficked from one trafficker. And that's another question we ask too, when we're trying to identify kids, is we ask them about their social media. We ask them, do you have a Facebook account? Because we're going to look for Facebook, we're going to look for back pages. We want Instagram, and that doesn't mean, because a lot of kids have access to those. I mean, probably 80% of the room here has a Facebook page. That doesn't mean that you're a victim of human trafficking. It's just one of the it's one of the identifiers. And then once an investigation goes on, sometimes they'll find hints right on those pages that the kid is being a victim of trafficking. And so here's the tattoos. And that top tattoo that says Savage, that's Savage Life. And when that young lady first came through the jack, she was only 11 years old. And she'd already been initiated into a gang. And she had this tattoo and another tattoo. So this tattoo, if you notice, it's a little bit blurry. It's not the best picture, but it does say Savage, as in Savage Life, which used to be Thug Life. But it's got tattoos and stars. So again, when you see tattoos, stars, hearts, with money signs, that's a big indicator that the kid is a trafficking victim. So you really, really want to pay special attention to that. And then see the young lady she literally has a bar scan on her neck, like a commodity. You could scan her right through a public scanner, right? So she's an item to be bought and sold, and that's a bar scan on the back of her neck from her trafficker. And back to the young lady that had the Savage tattoo, she also had another tattoo, and it said Ricky. So I said to her, well, who's Ricky to you? And she says, oh, Ricky's my older cousin. I said, oh, okay. And I didn't push her too much on it, I just asked her about it. But then when I tried to reach out to her mom, and her mom was hospitalized and really in hospice for a life-threatening blood disorder. And so then I tried to reach out to her uncle, and her uncle said, no, she's with this other aunt. And I tried to reach out to that other aunt and speak to her, and she goes, no, she's actually living with who her real father is. And I'm like, what do you mean a real father? And they said, well, the mother just told us that her father on the birth certificate, who never really cared for her anyway, wasn't really her father, so she's living with this guy, Mr. Skywalker. I'm like, what is this, Star Wars? And I'm thinking in my head, right? No. So, okay, so I call Mr. Skywalker, and I'm speaking to him, and he says to me, no, I said, who's Ricky? And he goes, I don't know who Ricky is. I'm like, well, is Ricky a cousin? And he goes, well, it's no cousin I know of. And I said, can you do me a favor? Can you call back that other aunt, that other uncle, and I'll call them too, and can you let me know who Ricky is? And he says, okay. Because I expressed to him what I thought my fears were, that perhaps when she was on runaway, she was being trafficked. So sure enough, he called me back, and I got to speak to an aunt and uncle, and there is no cousin named Ricky. She doesn't have a cousin named Ricky, so Ricky was actually her trafficker. And like I said, by 11 years old, she already had 2 tattoos. She's got many more by now. And unfortunately, she's so entrenched in the life that now she's recruiting. She's a bottom, so she's recruiting other girls, and she's also the enforcer. And then, does everyone know what MOE is for? Money over everything. So that's an MOE tattoo. Now, of course, all these tattoos in isolation, well, if I saw the bar code, I'd pretty much say that I'd call that in right away. So you do want to pay attention to tattoos, but please do, again, not, in isolation, it might not be their trafficking victim, but try to put the pieces together. If the kid's running away, if the kid has tattoos, if the kid's coming back with items that no one else bought for them, none of their caretakers, that really should be putting up some red flags for you. Okay, so we talked about, and I'll let Sue talk about this too, but we talked about language, because the kids may tell you certain things to key you in, or they may say things when you're interviewing with them that keys you in to you know that they have at least been exposed to the life. So daddy is usually the trafficker, right? That's my daddy, right? Okay. And then bottom is excuse my language, bottom bitch. Okay, so the bottom is the top earner, and sometimes she can even stop earning by selling herself as long as she gets other girls to sell themselves. Okay, so she's the bottom. So a lot of kids that start out being trafficking victims themselves start recruiting and trafficking other kids or other young ladies. And then turn a trick is turning a trick. I probably doesn't need to explain that. And a stable, like a stable of horses. Okay, they're not visiting the equestrian center. Okay, it's not horses. It's stable being your family. Okay, and folks and family. So if you hear say, "Oh, I'm with my folks," and what we hear from a lot of those young ladies is that same thing, like that's my brother, or that's my cousin, or that's my family, and there is no actual relation. It's just a web of trafficking that's going on. Wife-in-laws, they're going on dates. John is pretty easy. Out of pocket, usually out of pocket is a girl that's considered like a renegade or a rogue. But she's gone out of pocket, which means that she's maybe stepped away from the trafficker and she's gone out of pocket where she started to collect the money herself or himself. The rules, you had a whole explanation of the rules, but the rules are usually the rules of the life. I don't know if you
Right, every game has rules, and so does this game. Being in the life. So, yeah, there's rules. They all know they have to follow them.
Right. And it's not up here about eyeballing. Like, if you are with a trafficker, you're not allowed to eyeball another trafficker, because that means you might leave that one trafficker. If you eyeball that other trafficker, it might mean that you're trying to let them know you're interested and kind of jump in camp, and that's not allowed. So that's one of the big rules. A pimp's up. That's like if you go from one pimp to another pimp, you're pimping up. Hose down.
Pimp up, hose down is kind of also like an expression to make sure you understand the hierarchy. Pimps are always on the sidewalk, and the girls are, or the hoes are always on the street. It's kind of like, to stress. I know it's also, I think, like some kind of special on TV, but it's just really to point out the hierarchy and the whole game and the whole life.
And one that's not up here is square. See, we're all squares because we live a square life. We go to work every day and, work from 9 to 5 or 9 or much later if you're in social services. But we're all squares. Okay, so if you hear that word, oh, you're a square, well, that means that that's someone who really knows what the life is, because we're all squares because we live a normal life and go to school and go to work and like suckers.
There's also the expression in the life. So the kids that are living in the life means that they are living in the life of prostitution. And a lot of people don't realize that, because I've had a caseworker when I was doing a training one time said, "Oh, I just interviewed my child and she said that she's been in the life." And I told her I've been living every day in the life too, not understanding at all what she was talking about. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to go back and talk to her." So yeah, that's another thing. And coming home is when they come back to the stable after being out of pocket. Usually they've come back and they're going to come back and do what they have to do and play the game with the rules. This picture, and I have this here really for our CPIs when I do CPI trainings, but this is an actual real picture from, I think, like a makeshift brothel this is an old picture, down in South Florida somewhere on the West Coast. And if you look there, you can see indicators. If you look at what's in that picture, you'll see, obviously, lots of paper towels. You'll see the KY jelly, alcohol. You see the condom. You see the mattresses on the floor. Then you see a cup full of marbles. Do you know what the cup of marbles mean? It's the count of how many clients have been served. And this was like a makeshift, I think. It drove up to like migrant camps, like on payday, and it had like 3 different bed sets with sheets separating, was how it was explained to me. I wasn't involved in that, but that's how it was explained to me. So you have to look at indicators as well if you go into homes. Oh, I have the clicker. I'm waiting for her to click. Okay. Points to remember. Of course, it's rare for a child victim of human trafficking to say that they've been trafficked. You're not going to have a child come and say, I'm a victim, help me. It doesn't work like that. They don't even recognize themselves as being victims. They think they're volunteering in it. They think it's survival. And they think they've made the decisions to do it. But if you suspect a child is a victim of human trafficking, it's important that the child be gently interviewed and that the suspected trafficker not be present during the whole interview process. If you work with domestic violence victims, it's the same type of situation because the trafficker has power and control over the victim and they're scared to say anything and usually won't. You want to also be unbiased. You don't want to question them, don't be judgmental when you're questioning them.
And talk about, it is really rare as far as a person to come forth. Again, you have to look for all those indicators and make the calls based on that, because every once in a while a kid will come forward and let you know they're a trafficking victim. But that is the rare instance. A lot of times they don't see themselves as a victim. They think they're in control. So if you think about it, and you're whether you're a community kid or a foster care kid, and your parents have either turned a blind eye or they've allowed other people in your family to sexually abuse you, but now you're getting paid to sexually abuse yourself, you don't see yourself as a victim. And if I tell you you're a victim, you think I'm crazy. Because now at least you're making money out of it and you're able to take care of in your vision, you're able to take care of yourself. So they don't, these young ladies, a majority of them, don't even understand that they're victims. Or they have a Romeo trafficker. They think it's their boyfriend.
Yes.
And they're not used to being treated well. And they're not used to someone taking care of them and telling them they love them, especially these kids in dependent care. So they look at me like I have 2 heads when I'm trying to explain to them that they're actually a victim, and that's why I need to call into the hotline.
The next 2 pages are tips for first encounters and interactions with potential victims. This was actually taken from something that Class Kids Foundation had created with the State Attorney's Office in California, but it has some great points on it. And it says building trust is #1 priority, which we know when we talk to children, all children. If you don't have a trusting situation, you're not going to get any information out of that child. You want to reassure the potential victim that you are there to help and you care about them. The terminology and cultural sensitivity are important. We just talked about that. Knowing the appropriate street terms helps to build that trust. And don't expect a full and honest story during your first encounter, because you're not going to get it, because it takes more than 1 encounter to get the trust you need. You always want to be on their level. Avoid victim-blaming attitudes, body language, or behaviors. Avoid gas or acting shocked. Avoid pity, judgment, or patronization. And I always give an example here. There was a victim that I talked to for over a series of over a year. And she opened up gradually, told me a little bit more. She's now 27, and we still talk. But one thing she told me when I asked her, how did you keep yourself safe on the streets? Because she was a habitual runaway, ran the streets. Her mother was a prostitute. At age 4, she was out with her mom. I mean, she was raised in the whole life. And she said she kept a double-edged razor blade under her tongue. And I wanted to gasp right when she told me. I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out how can you keep a double-edged razor blade under your tongue without cutting yourself. But, I kind of responded to her, oh, wow, good thinking. You kept yourself safe. That's, good. And we went on, found out a lot more information. But if I had said, ooh, you're crazy, do you think she would have told me some more after that? She would have probably stopped for that day. So you have to be careful because you do hear things that would surprise you. You always want to assess safety and threat levels of all your victims and anticipate and expect that the victim may return to their trafficker, because that's usually what happens, especially if it's not their first time out. And we want to talk about making a report, and then we'll be enough time to show the last video.
Okay, good. And I wanted to expand a little bit, too, about the fact that just because we've assessed the kid once on their runaway doesn't mean we don't assess them 5 or 6 different times with that same tool. Because, like Sue said, sometimes we garner more and more information the more times we see the kids. Because they're not going to be, sometimes they're just not going to be forthright. They're not ready to be forthright. They're not ready to come forth. So we just garner as much information as we can the first time around. And coming across as non-judgmental and not trying to openly interrogate the kids it actually leads us to get a lot of information. We ask about their boyfriends. We ask about their boyfriends or girlfriends' names. We ask about adult friends. And because we're doing that, we're actually able to garner a lot of information that we can actually then share with law enforcement. So they can take that information toward obviously assisting the young lady, but also toward prosecuting these men and women. Women too are trafficking kids. So we want to make sure that these traffickers that are exploiting our kids are getting prosecuted. So if as much as you can stay kind of on the kids' level and try to be non-judgmental and not, the kids already know how dangerous it is. If you go and preach to them, you're not going to get anywhere. If you try to interrogate them, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you just try to have a conversation with the kids and just be kind of subtle about it, you'll be able to get a lot more information and able to make that call to the abuse hotline, because again, you have to be able to, when you call it into the hotline and you're talking about domestic minor sex trafficking or commercialized sexual exploitation, you have to be able to kind of identify an adult in the kid's life in some form of exchange that's happening. And you have to have some kind of indication that there's actually some form of sexual exploitation going on. So what you want to do is get as much information that you can from the kid, again, without interrogating them, about the trafficker. Ask the kids about if they have an adult boyfriend or girlfriend, adult boyfriends or girlfriends, adult friends, and what the nature of the relationship is, because very often that can be your trafficker, that adult that's involved in the kid's life. That is not a family, it could be a family member, but that they seem the most attached to if it's not their guardian or caretaker. And sometimes, especially if they're able to tell, you can ask what the legal name of their friends are, but also they'll kind of just tell you what the names are, and sometimes there's a slang there or street name, so that can be an indicator too, and you want to make sure you get that information. You want to ask about the race too, and the height and the weight of their adult friends, if they'll provide that to you, because again, that could be information of who their trafficker is. And again, we talked about paying attention to those tattoos. When you call the hotline and you're able to call about this youth and identify that tattoo, especially if it's maybe branded with the name of the trafficker, or you're able to say that he or she has a tattoo with money signs and hearts, that all that information really helps them be able to accept the call as a human trafficking or domestic minor sex trafficking call. Again, we ask that question straight out. You can ask if the parent tells you, oh yeah, my daughter comes home and she's got her hair done and she's got her nails done, or she came back with a new handbag. You can use that information and explain that the parent says that the young lady comes home with a new handbag, or she comes home and she's got her hair done, because that's showing an exchange, so you want to be able to call that into the hotline. The running away is key. Letting them know that she'll be gone away from the home for days at a time, or comes and goes as she pleases, or has been gone for 3 days, or just came in at 3 a.m. That information about being unaccounted for and away from the home, that's very important when you call the hotline. And again, social media and advertisements. You saw what Sue had up there, and you saw that what we had up there, the young lady on Backpage. So if you can say that you can find out if the youth is being advertised on Backpages, or any other social media, that is also something you can provide to the hotline in order to make sure the call gets accepted. What I would urge you to do is, like everything else, the Safe Harbor Act and other legislation that comes down, it takes a while for everyone to learn the ropes. So if you ever make a call to the hotline, and I think that's coming up. If you ever make a call to the hotline and they don't accept the call, ask to speak to your supervisor or call back.
And I was going to also add to that, to make a call, the maltreatment of human trafficking is different than any other maltreatment at the hotline. You don't have to have the identity of the perpetrator. I mean, it's nice if you can, the more information you have, the better. But you can say the child was picked up on the corner, known area for prostitution, and was thought to be prostituting, and have no idea anybody else involved, and they should accept that report. Because with human trafficking, is different than any other maltreatment at the hotline. You don't have to have an identified alleged perpetrator. If you do, it's great. But if you don't, they should still take that report.
Right. I mean, in Broward County, all we have to say is the La Quinta Inn, or oops, I'll get in trouble for that, or Plantation Inn, and they accept the call.
Right. This is real quick. It's a 4-minute little video to kind of end, and then we're going to open up for questions and answers. We'll have 10 minutes. You think that's okay?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna tell you something. If you pay the price, you can get what you want. I can get it for you.
Really?
Now, if you want something really young, that 200 it just costs a little more than that.
Sure.
But how young you talking? Talk to me.
Well, how young do you have?
Well, I don't have nothing younger than 14.
Okay, no, 14 is good.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, you're gonna have to add something to that.
Sure.
What you willing to add to that too? Just talk to me.
Well, like I said, this is my first time out.
You know. Now you.
So the girls over there cost 2, is that?
That's the women.
The women.
Now, if I told you 2, and you know you want something young, and I tell you to add something to it, just tell me, you just pick a figure to that.
Well, I guess, what, 3?
3. If you do 3, you got it.
He definitely just beat us, like, it'll probably stump you out, like, stump you, like, when you're on the ground, physically stump you. Yeah. He'll probably hit you with a belt, physically slap you, punch you.
He would beat me with broomsticks, handles, he would burn me with candles. He would take metal hangers and beat me with them and poke me with them, belts, anything that he can get his hands on, he would beat me with. The one time he had beat me so bad that he had ruptured my spleen and it put me in the intensive care unit. So it's like, once you knew that he could almost kill you, you'd rather do what he says than to get beat again.
If you come to them, that'll be like 150.
Okay.
If they come to you out call, that'll be like 200.
Okay.
An hour.
And I got a hotel room, so that's an out call.
Yeah, that's
okay. So 200 each.
Yeah, an hour.
Okay, so I'll give you 400. Or do I give them 200, or I give it to you?
Me, right
okay,
now.
so I'll give you 400, and and then we can tip the girls whatever on top of that.
Yeah, okay, that's about.
Is that all right with you?
Hold on, I run all this.
Okay.
These my girls.
Oh, okay.
They don't do nothing but look pretty and
We're all under 18. We're all the same age. There would be a few girls that I knew that were like in their 20s or whatever, but they had been doing it since they were our age anyways. I did wait till 12, and these girls were doing it since they were like 8 or 9, and now they're like 23.
I want to show them and tell them, like, what it feel like to be that hoe, to be degraded all the time, to be hit on, to be manipulated, to be sold all day, every day. Who was there to stop it? Nobody was there to stop it.
Questions?
I did want to add too, you saw that the picture to that video, how you saw like a young lady leaning into the car. So there are hotline numbers here, but if you see it happening right in front of you, call 911. Call right away. I mean, you call hotline when you're suspecting trafficking because of indicators, but when you're seeing it right in front of you, call it in. And you might think, well, how do I know that that kid isn't over 18? You know, maybe she's just working the trap, even that could be another question, but talking about minors at this point. So, but let's face it, most women say that they are younger than they actually are. So if she looks She says she looks like she could be 17. She's probably younger than 17. Like, I'm only 28, right? So, you know, we always go with the younger age. So make sure that if the kid looks, if it looks like possibly it could be a minor, call it in. If it's happening right in front of you, please don't just wait to call a hotline. Call 911 right away so you can have an immediate response. But these are the other numbers, certainly, that you can call if you suspect a young person is being trafficked.
And the top number is for adults. You can call children to that number as well if you're suspicious and want to go that way, or you call the abuse hotline, DCF abuse hotline for minors. Any questions? We still have a good 5-6 minutes.
Oh, did anyone make any comment cards and pass it into the volunteers? You tell them to do that?
No. I didn't. I don't know who's our volunteers.
We have a question from an online viewer.
Okay.
Okay, the question says, we have a teen in our program who fits all of the criteria for being at risk for being trafficked. She was DCF involved, but is not anymore. She is 16. She is also DJJ involved and is currently in the detention center for petty theft. While she had absconded, she also has a 7-month-old son. I called in an abuse report based upon her telling me that she was afraid to return home, but DCF has not sent an investigator to speak with her. Should I call in another abuse report on the basis of her being at risk for human trafficking so they can ask her these questions and investigate?
Absolutely, and if it doesn't get accepted, then ask to speak to the supervisor.
Right, and let her verbalize that there's concerns for human trafficking when she calls in that report.
And just as far as the Juvenile Assessment Center, in an 8-month period of the pilot project we did with the Department of Juvenile Justice, we called in 43 kids to the hotline for suspected domestic minor sex trafficking. 2 of those kids came in on sex-related charges. 2 out of 43. All the other kids, that's 41 came in on masking charges. They did not come in on a sex charge. We had to identify them through asking questions. They came in on loitering, pickup orders, larceny or petty theft. Or battery. They came in on different charges. So, you know, if you're waiting for the red flag of the kid to be arrested for some kind of lewd or lascivious behavior, that's not going to happen.
There was a question. We'll start with you.
What percentage of sex trafficking kids attain a healthy lifestyle?
That's a hard question.
And you know, it's a good question. And the thing is we're just now getting, over the last couple of years, getting proficient of identifying who the victims are. We don't really even have enough time treating the kids that we've identified to be able to say what positive outcomes we have. Tabitha from Department of Juvenile Justice is here. And there was a case in Fort Lauderdale with the Boom Boom Room, which was a enclave bordello, where they were trafficking minors, and some of which were in dependent care, some foster care kids. And Tabitha shared with us this morning a success story of one of the young ladies that was identified there as being sex trafficked in that home. And it took a lot of hard work from the Department of Juvenile Justice and others involved in her life, but she was able to move beyond that situation, get re-enrolled in school, get some family counseling, and become closer with her mom, and she was able to successfully move beyond the life. But the key really is everyone attending here today and watching on the webinar is being able to identify the kids early on, because the more entrenched they get in the life, kind of like the young lady that Sue was showing that is now an adult and still in the life, but she was a young lady when she got involved, that the earlier we identify these kids, report them, and engage with them, then the earlier the better success they're going to have in the long run.
In regards to the kids that come to your door, that's actually happened in my neighborhood. Is there a number you call the abuse line?
You can call both lines. Really.
Well, let me respond to that as well. First of all, when they come to your door, if you're able to get a picture of their ID, because they might not hang out for you to get anyone to respond, try to get a picture, because they are wearing IDs usually, or try to get their name. So when you call the abuse hotline, you have to have at least a name, a date of birth, and where the child's from. Otherwise, there's no place to respond when they leave your room, but also leave your house. But also call your non-emergency law enforcement number, because they can find them still in the neighborhood. They haven't gone far. So I would call the non-emergency number, unless it's an emergency situation. You can call 911 if the child's fainting, which we've had that before, or passing out. But if it's just the fact that you want to report it, call the non-emergency, and they're usually able to track them down further down the street.
Yeah, that's one of those circumstances when it's happening right in front of you that you can call local law enforcement, or if it's an emergency, call 911.
Any other questions?
How does 41 children that you identified and assessed that were being trafficked, what did you do with them?
Did you hear that?
I did hear that. That is a very good question. In Broward County, first of all, we do the assessments, and based on the assessments, we start attempting to engage the kids in services. We provide a clinical diagnosis if applicable, and we also talk about what services are recommended for those kids. In Broward, we're lucky enough to have, I shouldn't say we're lucky because the Boom Boom Room happened, but the Boom Boom Room at Enclave Bordello, that spurred all the community to come together, and we actually staff any kids identified every month and see if they're currently on runaway, are they still here, what services are they in, do they need to be re-engaged in services. So we make sure as a community of service providers, foster care agencies, Department of Juvenile Justice, that we wrap our arms around these kids and continue to try to engage them in services.
Next question. I think we have time for one or two more.
Other than Backpage.com, what other websites are teenagers using to advertise themselves?
There's like Moco Space and Instagram. There's really a lot of them.
They open up every day. There's more we discover daily.
Any efforts to shut down that aspect of Backpage.com? Because I know one of my girls did Backpage.com, so I didn't know if it was in progress. Because Craigslist was, they shut down that aspect.
Right.
Well, they shut down the escort services on Craigslist, but they pop up under different titles. I do know that there's controversy if they should shut down Backpage or not, because law enforcement is a great tool to locate these kids. So, any other questions?
I think there's a webinar.
I also wanted to add, I work for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Our hotline also is 24 hours, 1-800-THE-LOST. If you come across a poster or a back page or someone that you think is being exploited, also use that as another number to call.
Cyber tip, if you see things online that are suspicious, you can also report that to the cyber tip. Great resource there.
I think there's a question up here too from the webinar.
Right. We have a couple questions coming in from online viewers. One question is, isn't it illegal for the parlors to put the tattoos on the minors?
Yes, but it's also illegal to sexually traffic a minor. So.
Okay. There's a couple other ones here. There's one that someone's saying there's a van that drops off several people and ships to a home in their area. Can they call the hotline with the address of the house?
They can call the hotline, they can even call local law enforcement.
Okay. And then there's one here that says, when calling in an abuse report with the DCF investigator, will the DCF investigator know to ask these questions to determine if the child is at risk for human trafficking? Have they been trained to ask the questions you went over? Or is it better to call the human trafficking hotline to report if they suspect the child might be at risk?
I'll respond to that. If the child is in the state of Florida, it's better to call DCF hotline because the National Center is just going to send it down to us. And yes, the CPIs in Florida have been specialized trained in human trafficking indicators. And in most areas, we have a specific unit only that responds to only human trafficking. Both of you, then I think we're going to have to let go.
My question was really about funding. A while back, the Safe Harbor Act, when it was first being discussed, required 24/7 awake staff for a child who was identified as a trafficking victim. Has any more progress been made towards funding those particular residential settings?
I can answer that. Yeah, it's 24-hour setting. Actually, some money did get put aside for that, and it's gone down to certain areas. I know, like in Orange County and Orlando, we received funding for 8 beds. Broward County, I believe, received funding for, I don't know how many, but each area received some. So there's been some funding for that. It's just for this year, they're still having to redo it. and we really have an issue because we really need to concentrate on services as the whole picture. So, yeah.
Mine might be a little bit of a strange question and probably something that you don't track, but in having discussions with people, in different places, different sources, I think there's a part of society that thinks that women they enjoy this and this is what they want to be doing. So I'm just curious of these Johns, of what, maybe just hearing what your response is on the percentage of people that actually know that these girls are doing this against their will, because I think there's a part of society, and unfortunately even people that I've heard speak, that they think these women are just SLUTs and that they love this. So I'm just curious what your response is to that.
Well, I think they've been molded to think that they love it. I don't think anybody, grows up saying, I want to grow up and be a prostitute. I think they're recruited.
The men that are paying for this, like what percentage, that they know that, hey, you know what, these are what they want to do.
Oh, that I don't know.
Right.
There's actually a good study, but I don't know the answer to that.
Right. I can tell you that there is, when you go to, I want to say it's either Shared Hope or Polaris Project. It's just been a while since I viewed it, but they actually have a video that it's, she's taking off her clothes to be with a man, a John, but you hear what her thoughts really are. So it really is, she's talking about being a sexual abuse victim and how she just gets victimized every day and how much she really hates this. You hear her inner dialogue.
Yeah,
while
but
she's
what
in
did
it.
the
So
John?
they're
But she's
yes.
wondering, what do the Johns think of these victims? But you have to realize the Johns seek out prostitution because they want to work out fantasies that they don't have in their normal sexual life. And a lot of times these kids are victim to certain type of abuse, more abuse than you can imagine. So I don't know what they're thinking, but I think they're just thinking to work out the pleasure that they want, their fantasy, and but I don't know.
But there is some social media to bring about awareness so people really consider what they're really buying.
So it's already 1:35. We're supposed to be over at 1:30. Thank you. I hope you learned something.